Hello everyone. Today I like to talk about how can you master answer writing, especially for those who are giving mains 2022 or even who will be giving mains in the years after that. Uh, I'm Rishabh Kumar Rewar. I got rank 104 this year and I graduated from IIT Delhi from the batch of 2020. And this is what I'll be covering largely. So why is answer writing important? What does a good answer look like, and how do you move towards that, right? So without wasting any time, let's just have a brief understanding of why answer writing is important. Answer writing at the end of the day is presentation of your knowledge of what you know. So it is a way in which you let the examiner know that you know the answer. It does not matter whether you actually know it or not, because the examiner cannot, the person answering the checking the question cannot cross question you, right? Because it's, you write the paper, you submit it, and then what you've written, on the basis of that you're graded. So whether or not you actually understand the concept, whether you actually know it, doesn't matter. You just have to leave the impression that you know the answer. On the other hand, if you actually know the concept, if you know all the ins and outs of what has been asked, and you're still not able to present your answer in a manner that the examiner thinks that you know the answer, you won't be getting any marks. So therefore it's sort of a two-stop communication. You write the paper, send it to the examiner sees that paper, sees you in that paper, judges your knowledge, your personality, judges your way of presentation, and then gives marks accordingly. So that is what answer writing actually is, a way of presentation. Secondly, answer writing is important because it is probably the biggest differentiator in between different candidates, because at the end of the day everyone who's writing mains has read more or less the same sources, especially when it comes to general studies, GS. So since they have read, all the sources are relatively similar, almost everyone has given the same amount of, roughly the same amount of time, the understanding, the grasp of the concepts is relatively, broadly similar. However, where the difference comes in the GS marks is how have you written that answer in that limited amount of time that you get during the examination. And that is what differentiates a very good main score from a relatively low main score. Second part of why answer writing is important, or learning how to write good answers is important, is to complete the paper. Because if you haven't mastered, or if you, I won't say to become a master at it, but if you haven't practiced answer writing a lot, completing the paper within those 3 hours becomes a big challenge. And once you have left a few questions, if you haven't completed, you are relatively, compared to the people who have written all the answers, you are relatively disadvantaged, because those 20, 40, 60 marks, you haven't given your attempt in those questions, right? So that's why that makes answer writing even more important. So I'll be moving on towards what aspect of answer writing, that is, what does a good answer look like. So everyone must be aware of that an answer has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So let's talk about introduction briefly here. So what's the objective of an introduction is that it lets the examiner know that you understood what the question was, right? And and along with that, it also piques the examiner's interest in what's going to come ahead. It adds something unique, a data, a fact, a definition, summary of what needs to be written, something that opens up the discussion a little, something that leaves some scope to be discussed in the body and in the conclusion, something that gives a trailer of what's going to come, right? That is what a good introduction is. So for example, if there's a question on let me think for a moment. If there's a question on, let's say, agricultural issues, right? So a good introduction can be of many types. It can be you can list down the number of issues that farmers face, or you can start with the increasing a data on increasing suicide rate of farmers, right? Or you can you can think about a fact that is something like X percentage of India's employment, that is around which is almost half is employed in agriculture. However, the GDP output is relatively very low, around 15, 16, whatever the figure is. So you can open the answer with something that piques the interest of the examiner. After an introduction, and that is, I used to follow this practice on a regular basis for every answer, that after an introduction you should add a figure or a diagram or a flowchart or a map, something that is not plain text. So what that does is it makes the answer a little attractive, in the sense that it has something visually appealing. So mostly the answers will have text, then more text, then more text, and then here and there sometimes a diagram. But if you add a diagram just after introduction, it can be a figure. It can be a spider diagram, something in the center and 4 or 5 arrows coming out and describing something. It can be a flow chart. It can be a map that shows a location, or shades or highlights an area that is important in the context of the question. So there can be many things that can be added here. It's all about how creatively you do that, right? Excuse me. For example, if there is a question on if you pick up the same aspect of farmer issues, you have given a data and a fact in the introduction. After that, you have made a small box, and in the center you have written issues of farmers, and then you have written high debt levels. Second, low prices, market prices that farmers get. Third, you have written logistical costs. Fourth, you have written less productivity of land. Fifth, you have written lack of information about what crops to grow, how to grow, etc. So you can make a diagram that has 6-7 lines coming out of it. The examiner sees that and he knows, okay, you know what you're talking about. After that, you can follow it up with the body. I'll be coming back to that later, in which you can explain each of the points that you have made in the diagram, or you can add reasons or something like that, right? I hope you get the gist of it, that a diagram after the introduction makes the whole answer a little more visually appealing, and it also conveys more information in less words. And what does less words in an answer do is it reduces the time it takes you to write that answer. Okay. Second part is the body of the answer. So the whole idea is that you need to break up what all is asked into different parts, and then you have to address the demand of each part separately. What this does is that it gives the impression to the examiner that all subparts, all sub portions of the questions have been answered. So many times when we are writing, if there are 3 parts asked in a question, and many times we combine 2 and write them together, because it naturally makes more sense if a reason and remedies, for example, if challenges why farmer issues happen and what you can do is asked. So many times it feels like, okay, we can write both of them together. We write what are the reasons, for example, the logistical challenge, and then we can write, okay, there needs to be cold centers, there needs to be transportation trucks, etc., something like that just after that. So what this does is the examiner might feel that you have not covered all points properly. In the first impression, the examiner might feel, okay, you have only written the reasons, and The thing that follows after that is the explanation, because you need to understand that the examiner quite probably wouldn't be reading each and every word of your answer sheet, because he has many other answer sheets to check, he has many answers to look at, etc., etc. So you just have to make it easier for him to realize that you have answered all points. So that is one thing that you should focus upon. Second is, you don't have to elaborate a lot. So this is something that, a mistake that I used to do, that I used to write a point and then I used to elaborate it in 2-3 lines so that it becomes very easy to understand what I want to say. However, you should have some faith in the qualifications of the examiner. For instance, if you have written in farmer issues, if you have written low realization of market price, something like that the farmer is not getting. So you can use these keywords that farmer isn't getting good market price. You don't have to elaborate it that due to low market prices that the farmer gets, he faces a lot of problem in getting returns for his investment, something like that. That will take 3 lines. What you can do is, you can just mention the keyword, and rest of it assume that it's self-explanatory, until and unless the keyword is something very tricky or something very niche that usually people won't be knowing. Then you should explain it. Third point is also, what does mentioning only keyword and not explaining does is that it reduces the number of words that you are putting in, and it reduces the time you will take in writing, in finishing that answer. Another part is to many a times there are seemingly very obvious points that in any answer there will be many points that will feel obvious, that okay, this is something too obvious to be written, and I should write something very unique, and I won't write those obvious points. And that is something that I think is not the correct practice, because very often not writing the obvious points would be a signal to the examiner that you are not aware of that obvious point. You are not aware of something so basic. You are not, and that will lead to the examiner cutting marks. So even if there's a seemingly very redundant point, for example, if you think of again in agricultural issues, if you say lack of infrastructure, something like that, so it seems very obvious. Okay, ye bhi kyun likho? Because I have like 6-7 very unique points, that lack of informational services to the farmers, lack of awareness. If you have these unique points, you'll feel like I shouldn't write something very redundant. But as a matter of fact, you should write that point. And if you feel that there is nothing to explain that point, use data to enrich it. For example, if there's a question, if there's a point on logistical challenges, so you'll just write logistical challenges. After that, you can give a data that 14% of India's GDP is spent on logistics, which is relatively much higher than developed countries, something like that, right? So you can use data to enrich those seemingly redundant points. Next part that I believe is very important in the body of an answer is the number of points that you're writing, because again, at the end of the day, it's all about how much can you make the examiner believe that you know a lot about what is being asked. And one way to do that is to have a lot of points in your answer. I'm not saying compromise on the quality, but I'm saying if there comes a time where you have to choose in between writing 4 very good quality points and 8 average points, because 4 of them would be good quality but 4 very relatively average points, always go for the the 8 points, or the points that are more, because the more points you have in a question, in an answer, it gives the impression that you have covered more dimensions, and that gives an impression that you are a person who thinks very widely, you are a person who has read a lot, you are a person who is able to interconnect different aspects, you are a person who thinks holistically, who has a comprehensive view of the problem. So the more number of points, many a times the examiner, I believe, wouldn't even be reading all of those points. He'll just say, okay, this guy has written 10 challenges. He must have covered everything. I'll just, give him good marks. I don't know exactly what happens, but I think this might happen, right? So one rule of thumb is to write 10 points for 10 markers, 15 points for 15 markers. So for if in a 15 marker there are three parts to the question, write five points each for each part. That will give you 15 marks. So that should be a comfortable level. If you can write more than that, even better, right? And there are few more things that I'd like to mention in the body of an answer. Is how do you make the person, the examiner who is checking, realize that you have answered or you have addressed the demand of the question, right? Because many a times the questions aren't very simple, like what are the agriculture issues. No, there will be a statement that some figure XYZ, this ABCD has happened and this happened. Elaborate. So in that you will have to first understand what do they want to elaborate you on. What do they want you to elaborate on? What is that core demand of the question that needs to be met so that you get those marks? And you need to put that demand out there in front of the examiner in very prominent aspect, that it should be very clear that you understand what is being asked and that you have fulfilled that demand, right? So the whole idea of the answer should be, all the introduction, body and conclusion are in a way of telling the examiner that you have understood what is being asked and that you have addressed the demand that the examiner has from the answer, right? Moving on to the conclusion part. So very often I feel that and I even see that people when there's a crunch of time, they spend more time on body and they completely skip the conclusion and then they move on to the next answer. On the other hand, I believe it is better to just write a one line conclusion, right? Something like, if it comes to agriculture issues, you can say that the recent changes in farming technology, or something like the recent agricultural reforms would in the future, address these issues. Or you can give a positive figure that since the past 5-6 years the farmer suicides have relatively been on decline, something like that, right? You can mention a government scheme. You can mention how that scheme will help in addressing these issues. You can be a little optimistic. You can be a futuristic. You can give a futuristic conclusion as to in the future this might happen. Things will get better. Or you can give a summary of the answer that you have written. If you don't have enough time, write a one line conclusion, or if you have enough time, a 2-3 line conclusion. It gives closure to the answer, that the answer started from an introduction, it had a body, and at the conclusion you're leaving a good taste at the end. The examiner feels that, okay, at the end of the answer he feels, okay, yeah, okay, it's closed, it's not open ended. You have given it a conclusion, right? You have given it an end. You have that foresight, you have that optimism, you have that you have added that sense of completion, that nothing more is required from an answer. Because if you don't write a conclusion, it seems that अच्छा हाँ body में और कुछ भी हो सकता था, या फिर इसका कि और कुछ भी आ सकता था, खाली खाली लग रहा है. But once you have concluded it in a good manner, it feels fine, that okay, yeah, it's complete now, right? Moving on to how do you move towards writing a good answer. So the whole idea is, and the broad philosophy is, that there are three elements in each answer. The content, that is the knowledge part. The presentation, that is how do you write an answer, what is the structure, what are the diagrams, whether you underline or not, how do you put it in a box, how neat is it, etc, etc. And third is the part of speed, that a 10 marker, have you finished it, are you able to finish it in 7 minutes, a 15 marker, are you able to finish it in 10, 11 minutes, whatever time you get, approximately 10 minutes. So that's what speed is. And the whole idea towards attempting a well balanced good paper is to replicate this balance of each answer, that is content, presentation and speed, 20 times consistently. Once you have done this, you have a good well attempted paper, right? So let me tell you how you I'll take each part of these three elements of a good answer to, and I like to elaborate a little on how to improve. So content on the first hand is something that improves with time. So once you are starting your mains preparation, especially between prelims and mains, those 90 days, as and as you read more things, you include them in your answers, in your mock tests, and you repeat it again and again, the content starts consolidating in your brain, or it your notes start getting more and more richer, and you are able to link it in your brain. Okay, that thing that I had written somewhere is relevant here. You are able to expand your horizons when it comes to different points, so that you are covering all dimensions. So that is how content improves. You need to have very especially when it comes to mains answer writing and GS, you need to have a very limited resource, one book that you're referring to, one resource that you're referring to, make notes out of it, consolidate those notes again and again and again, so that it becomes something a little more concise, that you can revise multiple times, and start using the content of those notes into your answers on a regular basis. Only after that you will be able to connect dots here and there, and in the examination hall you will be able to present that content in a way that is coherent, in a way that addresses the demand of the question. Second part is presentation, and this is largely what many so the content I believe most people have. Presentation is what I believe only some people have, right? Because presentation takes practice. You have to write a lot of answers. Only after that you will be able to realize what should be the structure of the answer. How should you be able to present it in a way that makes it unique, where you can use your creativity and add a map. Because I'll be taking an example of a map, because adding maps is something that makes the examiner realize that firstly it is visually very appealing, because you have made all those you're depicting a place, you have shaded the region, you have marked the region, you have added label to that, and you are providing information. So, and this is something that most people won't be doing. So adding a map, adding a flow chart, adding that spider diagram that I mentioned in the beginning, all of these things give a sense of give a breather to the examiner, because the examiner has been reading words in many answer copies since the morning he started checking. And once he comes to your answer copy and he sees there are a lot of diagrams, there are a lot of maps, there are a lot of flow charts, it becomes easy for him to check the answer. It becomes easy for him to understand what you are trying to say, right? And this only comes once you have practiced a lot. Once you have in many answers you have added a lot of maps, in many answers you have been able to think creatively and add a lot of diagrams, in many answers you have the information you already know, you have in that small nick of time that you get while writing the answer, you are able to think of how to reorganize that content, that information you have, into something that is visually more appealing, or into something that is less verbose and has more brevity, right? Third aspect is the aspect of speed, and this again I believe is a little isn't given a lot of focus by people, by aspirants. That is, you get 7 minutes to write one 10 marker, and one 10 marker has 2 pages, so you have to fill up 2 pages in those 7 minutes. You get roughly 10 minutes to write a 15 marker. A 15 marker has 3 pages, and in a 3-hour exam you get you get 10 15 markers, 10 10 markers. So 10 into 7 is 70, 10 into 10 is 170. That gives you 170 minutes with 10 minutes to spare. That is the time I used to allocate while giving the paper. So how do you write a good coherent answer with the content you have in a very presentable and visually appealing way in those 7 minutes or in those 10 minutes for in the case of 15 marker is the name of the game. So how does speed improve? Speed improves in my understanding by two aspects. First, naturally as you start writing answers, your writing speed increases, you are able to think more quickly, you are able to your brain is moving faster than your hand. That is one more important thing. Throughout the 3 hours that you are writing the answer sheet, there should never be one moment that your hand was working faster than your brain. That is, you have written what you had thought, now you have to stop and now you have to think of what you need to write. That is something that should not happen. Your brain should be moving ahead, should be racing ahead of your hand. As in when you have written a point that you had thought of, when that ends, you should be prepared with the next point before that the previous point has ended. So that feature of your hand not stopping for 3 hours will give you this ability to write, to include a lot of content in your answer in a very presentable manner, right? Second aspect by which speed is increased is once you start decluttering the information in your brain. And I'll like to rephrase that in the sense that there's a lot of things that come to your mind. Many times there are a lot of things that come to your mind once you see a question. How do you organize it in your brain so that only the most relevant things come out in a manner, in the words that are least in number? You don't have to write long, because the more long sentences or the more number of words you use, the more time it will take for you to write. Also, on the other hand, the more time it will take for the examiner, and the examiner doesn't want to spend a lot of time on your answer copy. All he wants is to read your answer copy as quickly as possible, right? So the whole idea is to reduce the declutter your brain, your thoughts, organize them before you're in the examination hall. That is, if a question is asked on court of contempt, what's the first the first thing that comes to your mind should be an introduction that you're ready with, a definition or the court of contempt law of 1971 or some articles in which the power is given, something like that. So it should be you're prepared what to write when things come. And if there's something that you haven't prepared for, a question that you haven't prepared for, even in that scenario, your mind should be used to such a way of thought that whatever comes out is coherent. You're not writing something that is irrelevant. And that is how your speed increases. That is how your efficiency of writing increases. And once you have maintained this balance between all these three aspects in your answer, and you have replicated it 20 times, you have written a very well attempted paper. And how do you maintain this balance and attempt that well attempted paper is that you have practiced it many times before you have gone into the examination hall. So I'd like to suggest one thing here, that many people write a lot of mock tests and all. What I did is that a month before the mains examination, I started writing simulations. So what is the simulation? It is the exact way the examination is would be held. I'll simulate that at my home. So what I did was the exam was on started from 8th of January. So on 7th of December, I started my first simulation. So I did GS1, GS2 from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. GS2 on day 1. On day 2, that is 8th of December, I did GS3, GS4. On 9th of December, I did my optional 1, paper 1, optional paper 2. This was one simulation. And this is a very, a trying time. The first time you do this, because you're giving 2 papers in a day, and then you're doing it again the next day, then you're doing again the next day. It takes a toll on your physical and mental, stamina, right? But you have done this once, then you do it again. I did it again on 17th, 18th and 19th of December. I even included essay this time. And then I did it the third time on 28th, 29th and 30th of December. So when I'm going to the examination hall for the first time to write my first mains on the 8th of January, I have done that 3 times before. I have gone through those same stress levels 3 times before. So I am relatively better off than someone else who has not simulated that experience, right? So the whole idea is to be very prepared and practice a lot so that there are no surprises in the examination hall. And that is, I believe, if there's one way to get better, to master answer writing, it is to write a lot of answers. Get feedback on them, understand where you are lagging, improve on it, and repeat it again and again and again. I hope this helped, and I hope to see you again soon.